I could go on about this one. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Queen Talks. I'm here today. I'm solo. I'm still on my porch enjoying the Florida sun, and it is a beautiful Saturday morning. Yes, Saturday. I usually like to record these on Saturdays because I have a really slow morning. I can kind of take my time with things. I don't coach on Saturdays because all my girls are playing games, which I'm actually going to watch a few later today, and I'm really excited for. But Saturday mornings are my time to record these episodes and to talk about topics that a lot of you are messaging me about. Now, to give a little bit of a background, this topic came up because I just interviewed a guest on the Soccer Queens podcast, Steve Rowland, who is a soccer dad of a high school senior who has played in the girls' ECNL for many years. And Steve is also a soccer coach. He's coached in the Netherlands, he's coached in the US, he's still coaching. He has a wealth of experience. So he's not just a soccer dad coming on and giving his opinion. He knows a lot about the game. He knows a lot about the youth soccer climate in today's world, and he knows a lot about the recruiting process and how to get seen. So Steve made a very interesting point on my podcast, and it was about how his daughter switched to an ECNL team and she left her old team that was a lower level. She kind of lost her best friendships by moving to this higher level ECNL team. So I'm going to get into that today, but I first am going to reflect on the Hall of Fame event I went to at Johns Hopkins University a week ago because it does tie into all this. And when I was giving my induction speech, I was really reflecting a lot on my journey as a young soccer player. And in this episode, when I'm giving advice, I can only provide my experience. And I obviously can't tell you what to do, what club team to be on, when to go to travel. Although I will give my perspective and I hope it helps and maybe allows you to think things through better, but I can only give my experience. So when I was giving my induction speech, I was really just reflecting on how I grew up just organically falling in love with soccer. I had a very different story of playing recreationally and not entering the travel system until I was around 13 years old. So I was lucky enough to be on a rec team where the coaches were really good. They had a soccer background. They weren't just like random volunteer coaches. They were very knowledgeable about the game. They coached in college and they were just kind of now doing recreational coaching for fun. So I was lucky enough to have rec coaches where I really learned the game from a technical and tactical standpoint. And I remember my first rec coach was someone who had played Division 1 soccer in college, and he taught me how to shoot the ball properly, and he would stay after practice with me for an hour giving me a free private lesson on shooting. And I don't know, like I feel like in the rec system, like these coaches like give so much of their time, and my coaches really went above and beyond, and I was really lucky to have that experience. Then my second rec coach, he was Austrian. His name was Christoph, and he played at a high level. He also was one of the coaches at Johns Hopkins University at the time and kind of got me thinking about playing at Hopkins. He just had a lot of great experience, and he also did the same for me. He gave me a lot of private lessons and really took time to help me develop my skills after practice, or I would show up before practice and he would help me out. So I had just very amazing rec coaches, which also helped me to stay in the rec system because I felt like I was getting just a fun soccer experience, but I was also learning a lot about the game. And I really enjoyed the team culture. These coaches just really instilled in the team and just how we had so many fun traditions and fun team outings. And it was all about just the joy of being together as a group. And it really wasn't so much about just focusing on wins. Of course, winning was fun. I mean, we can't deny that winning does matter to some extent in sports, and that's what we are aiming for. But it was more about the relationships and the friendships, and that took priority, but because that took priority, our team chemistry was great at the rec level, and we won a lot of games as a result. And I think there's something to say about how if the team doesn't have good chemistry or if there's a lot of clicks, it can also affect the wins versus losses. So that's just something to think about as well. So throughout this whole experience, I decided to say to my parents at age 13, I was like, you know what? Like, I am ready for travel soccer. Like, I'm ready to compete against even better players than me and be with teammates who are better than me. And I'm just ready to take the next step. So I kind of drove that decision myself, and it wasn't forced on me. And my parents were like, all right, like, we'll take you to a travel tryout. So I went to my first travel tryout, and actually, Christoph, the coach of my rec team, was luckily one of the travel coaches for this club. So he ended up switching and taking a lot of our rec players to this travel club. And it ended up being the perfect situation because I knew a lot of the girls from my rec team, and I still knew the coach, and he was an amazing coach. And I'm like, all right, this is a no-brainer. So I'm gonna try out for this travel team. I'm gonna try out for Christoph's travel team. Let's do this. So I make the team, and I'm with Christoph for about another year or so, and still have the best of friends on this team, and everything was great. But I started to think, okay, this team isn't really going to like the biggest showcases. So we weren't really going to like the Disney showcase, the Vegas showcase, the San Diego Cup at the time. And I knew I wanted to play in college, and I knew that during this time, so my time was a lot different than nowadays, but during this time, like, these were the showcases I had to get into to get seen because there weren't ID camps during this time. So really the only way to get seen was to be at these bigger showcases. So I just recognized it for what it was. And I ended up trying out for the best team in the state of Maryland, Bethesda Soccer Club at the time. And I was, I think, a sophomore in high school. So right around that critical recruiting period, I tried out for Bethesda Soccer Club, and I was really nervous. I was like, I don't know if I can play at this level, but I know this is what I'm going to need to get recruited to play in college. And I was looking at like D1 schools, D3 schools. So I had to really be on one of the best teams in the state of Maryland. And Bethesda Soccer Club was. So they had won the state cup every year. They were making regionals. They were making nationals. They had top 25 D1 commits through the club. So I was like, all right, let's do this. And I'm ready to get more exposure. So I make Bethesda, and the coach at the time says to me, all right, you might not play a lot, but you have to prove yourself again. So here I am on the best team in the state of Maryland. I'm not playing as much. I'm not the rock star on the team anymore. And yes, it did suck, but it was a humbling experience that I really needed to step my game up. So I had to not only prove myself again, but I also had to assimilate into a new team culture. So it was very different than my old travel team where we were all just like happy and like everyone got along, everyone was best friends. This new culture at Bethesda, it was really intense. All of the girls wanted to play D1, they all wanted scholarships, so everyone was extremely competitive, which was fine. I will say I did enjoy the new intensity of the practices. I always felt like I left practice like I accomplished something. Like, man, that was such a hard practice. Like those small sided games, those 1v1s, those 2v2s, like that crushed me, but I got better. So I was recognizing I was getting a lot better as a player too. And I don't think I would have gotten that intensity within my old team. Like this new Bethesda practice was like constantly ball and play, constantly competing against girls who were bigger, stronger, and faster and more skilled than me, and I really had to raise my game. So I appreciated the new competitiveness of it, and I really grew as a player in that sense. One thing that I didn't really look into as much was just the relationships. And this is what Steve Rollins mentioned in our episode when he talked about how his daughter made the switch to ECNL, how the relationships weren't really there as much. Like a lot of the girls, like they like got along, it was fine, it was cool, but they weren't like best of friends like her old team. And I can say the same, like this was my exact situation. I will say though, like there weren't like cliques or there wasn't like a toxic environment on this Bethesda team. It just was like, we're not best friends. We all are just trying to get recruited and exposed, and it is what it is. And at the time, I basically just accepted it for what it was. I was like, all right, like I'm just going to get better as a player. And I have a great coach. Our coach was really awesome. Our assistant coach and our trainer was badass. And I did love the soccer environment. And I loved going to the bigger showcases and traveling and getting new experiences. Like I was ready to take that step at this age. I was 14, 15 at the time. And, like I didn't get along with the girls the best I could have. Like we were nice to each other, but it wasn't like I looked forward to practice to like, oh my gosh, I get to see the girls. Like it never was that. It was it was like strictly business. But again, during this time, I moved into acceptance of that and I realized, all right, this is probably going to go on for another few years until I commit to a college program. And then whatever, like once I commit, I can go back to a team where it's all about like the fun and the relationships and it's not all like soccer, soccer, soccer and like compete, compete, compete. So I guess my advice is it's like, what's your end goal? And if your end goal is maybe to get more exposure or a little bit more exposure than you are, then maybe ECNL is the way to go. Maybe a higher level team is the way to go. But realize that might be what it's all about. It's about the soccer development, it's about getting exposed, it's about being a competitive environment. And maybe you will sacrifice losing some friendships. Maybe you will sacrifice being in an environment that's like, whoa, like this is really intense. And I don't think a lot of people have the perfect club situation. Now, I wrote this down and this is just something to consider. So, the three C's. When thinking about making a switch to a travel team or a higher level team, here are the three C's that I would look at. So the first is coaches. A lot of parents ask me, Erica, what's the best? GA, ECNL, DPL, ECNLR. Like there's like so many acronyms. Like it's just another acronym to me because the coaches matter most. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're ECNL, GA, there's amazing coaches at all these acronyms and there's bad coaches at all these clubs. So it's like I wouldn't so much think about the league or the club, but look at the coach. Is the coach going to teach my daughter soccer? Is the coach going to develop my daughter into the best player she can be? Is the coach someone I can communicate with? Is the coach someone who really cares about my daughter? Is the coach someone who is transparent and upfront and honest, even when it's bad news? I think it's important to have a really good coach first and foremost. It doesn't really matter what club you're on. Everyone's like, "Well, what about the club?" I'm like, it's more about like who's coaching the freaking team. So, coaches first and foremost. Second, connection. So I know this one is a hard one to get, but is the team close or is it a toxic environment or do the girls at least get along? They don't have to be best friends. Like no team is going to be best friends, but at sometimes at these levels, you just have to maybe accept that, and that might be something you will sacrifice. But there might be some cases, and I know this, there are a lot of ECNL and GA teams and best teams in the country where the girls do get along and they're best friends, but like you literally have the perfect situation. Well, not everyone has the perfect situation, but the next C I listed is competition. So, what level of competition do you want? Do you want your daughter to train and practice with girls that are better than her, that might humble her, where she might not get as much playing time? God forbid she doesn't get as much playing time as her old team, but is that what you want? Like, do you want her to continue to improve? And I always say, if you want to level up your game, you do have to get uncomfortable. And that might mean you're a bench player for the first few months of the season and you're fighting for playing time again on this new team and you have to prove yourself all over again. But that can be a great thing. And that's going to happen when your daughter enters freshman year of college. When I went into Johns Hopkins preseason, I had to prove myself all over again. I didn't know who any of these girls were. The coach, he knew how I played, but I still had to prove myself to him and earn a starting spot that freshman year. So competition can be a good thing. Or maybe you're on the other end and you're like, you know what? Like, we're kind of fine with like the mediocre competition. We're just happy our daughter's happy and we're not going to try and fix what isn't broken. So if that's you, then great, stay where you are. Don't try and fix what isn't broken. But if you're disappointed in the competition and your team is just rolling over teams like 6, 7, 8, nothing, then that's a decision to think about. So we have coaches, connection, and competition. Those are the 3 C's I want you thinking about. But I also want you thinking about that, will any of the 3 C's ever be perfect? I get DMs all the time like, "Oh, Erica, like, why can't we have it all? Like, why can't we have a good environment and a good coach and like, good girls and parents who aren't nasty?" And I'm like, if you have all the 3 C's and it is perfect, then you are the odd one out. You are the minority, and you should thank your lucky freaking stars that you have the perfect situation. So stop complaining about the little things. So really consider these things as you're thinking about making a switch to a higher level team and just mixing things up. I would say most young girls soccer players think about switching teams around ages like 12 or 13. That's usually the age when things get mixed up and everyone's like leaving teams, or like 2 players leave one team and then everyone else is scrambling, well, should we follow those players, should we go with them, is our team gonna fold, and this and that, and like, is the world gonna end, is my girl ever gonna get seen, like, is she gonna get the scholarship, is she gonna even get exposed, is our team gonna fall apart, like, should we follow the slow down and just reevaluate what is important to you. Connection, coaches, competition, or which ones are you willing to maybe make a sacrifice on? It might be one of them, it might be 2 of them. You might want a higher competition, you might not have the best coach, or you might have the best coach in a high competition, but your daughter's not going to be connected with the girls. Like, it's not all going to be perfect. And I think we tend to think, well, the grass is always greener on the other side with that other club, or maybe if we switch to this acronym, it's going to get better. But I do think the grass can be green where you water it too. And I think if you are transparent with the coach, the girl makes an effort to get along with the players, then there are ways to water the grass where you are. I think a red flag for a lot of college coaches is when they see a girl who has like constantly switched club teams on her resume and has like constantly club top every season. I used to work in recruiting and that was a big red flag for me because I was like, well, are you willing to make sacrifices? Are you ever going to be consistent with anything? Of course, like, you'll want to leave a club team when the environment is toxic or abusive. Of course you wanna do that, but if you're leaving, like, all the time and there isn't really, like, a crazy toxic environment, and it's just like, "Oh, well, the girls aren't super close," then it's like, well, like, just give something a try for once. I mean, I think there's so much to this topic and so much for people to think about, and I can only speak to my experience. Like, I can't tell people exactly what to do, but I will say this: your girl is not going to necessarily fall behind if she waits a year or 2 to switch to a higher level team. Like, right now, if your girl is, like, 9, 10, or 11, or even 12 years old, and she's on a team, and she's happy, and she's loving life, and she's falling in love with the game, and she loves her coach, and she just loves everyone on the team, like, you don't really need to make the jump right now. I think a lot of parents of young ones especially are preyed on from these higher level teams. "Oh, like, we're gonna call you up and tell you that your daughter, like, deserves to be on this higher level team, and we're going to poach players," and it just turns into this whole mess, and it, like, puts the girl and the family in such a bad position when she's, like, already happy on her current team. So it's just like it's just, like, messed up all around, but only like you can make your decision and just think it through more and realize like you're not going to fall behind if you switch to a travel team at age 12 or 13. You're definitely not. And there are more ways to get recruited now. So with me, like, back at age 13, 14, the only way to really get recruited was to go to these bigger showcases. ID camps didn't exist, and, like, the fancy, like, video footage didn't exist. We were sending in VHS tapes where you couldn't even see the ball, like, So, like, I had to accept that I did need to get to these showcases, but it was what it was. I did it for only 2 years on a team that I was like, I don't really the girls are alright," but I accepted it, and I got recruited and then moved on and went back to a fun team my senior year and played pickup soccer. That's really all I did, and it was a blast. But nowadays, there's way more ways to get recruited than being on the higher level team. And I'm talking girls who don't wanna play top 25 D1. Top 25 D1, most of those schools, like the UNCs, the Stanfords, they are going to the ECNL showcases, they're recruiting US youth national team players. Yes, like, that's where you kinda have to be on that team, but there are outliers where girls will show up to an ID camp and blow these coaches away. And they're like, "Who the heck is that? Oh, that's an ECNL R girl? Holy crap, we're gonna give her another look." So, I've seen it happen, and there are other opportunities to get exposure. So if college soccer is the end goal for the girl, then there's plenty of ways nowadays to get seen. It doesn't always have to be on the top team in your state. Look, I'm a huge fan of ECNL and GA. I think the leagues are really competitive. The soccer is amazing. The showcases are really fun, but it isn't for everyone. And look, I'm going to read some of the private DMs, obviously anonymous, that I've gotten over the last few days from parents talking about their experience with these higher level teams. And again, it's going to be different for everyone. So one person said, the ECNL GA journey is not for everyone, and it does take a toll. I hear this from parents all the time. You can still have a competitive environment without ECNL GA. I agree with that. I have an amazing group of girls competing with ECNL GA teams in tournaments, and the team is still enjoying time with their friends and competing against strong teams. Okay, so that's one message I got. Let's go to a mom who DM'd me. I fell into an ECNL team when my daughter was 9, not having a clue as to what it was all about. A year and a half later, I want her out so badly. It's an awful environment and culture. I played soccer very competitively, and this is just crazy. I'm having a hard time finding a club, however, that teaches good soccer with decent competition in a normal, healthy, fun loving environment. Why can't I have both these days? So, my response to this, so I think the girl is like 9 years old, that is really young. I mean, I think at that age, you should just still be having fun. It doesn't need to be, like, super competitive. You don't have to be on ECNL or pre-ECNL or pre-academy, whatever the hell they call it nowadays, at age 9. If your daughter is enjoying where she's at now at age 9, then don't make the switch. You won't fall behind. But again, to this mom's point, why can't I have both these days? Well, you probably can't. Like, not a lot of people have, a healthy, fun environment with decent competition and also a good coach, but some people do. Like, I know people in these comments and messages, they're, like, kinda hating on the ECNL. I don't think it's not an ECNL problem. I think it's, like, they just don't look into it. They just don't look into, "Okay, well, who are the girls on the team? Who's the coach of this team? And are they a competitive ECNL team?" So, I don't think we need to point the blame at, like, ECNL or GA. They're great leagues, but it's more about, like, what's going on within that specific team. Let's see if there's anything else here. This post got a lot of comments, like, let's see. Okay. All of my kids play ECNL. However, each one of them finds greater joy in lower level soccer, so they play on two teams. They don't want to give up ECNL experiences, but they also don't want to give up the bond they have with the other team. These bigger clubs do not have the interpersonal relationships, and it shows. I don't know if I would change it and take them out, but I would never deny them both. For my daughter, especially, it has gotten her through a terrible coach on the higher level. I do wish that these showcases that deny access to non ECNL teams would realize the depth that they have and the fantastic players that they have. They're definitely doing a disservice to today's youth. Again, it's not necessarily an ECNL problem, it's more of, like, you got on an ECNL team that just happened to have a terrible coach. I know ECNL teams that have amazing coaches. Like, a lot of the girls I train, they rave about their coach. They feel like they get a lot out of practices, they feel like they're learning more about the game, and they do have teams that get along. So, it is hard to find that perfect situation, but really look at the 3 Cs: coach, connection, and competition. Or maybe you just wanna focus on one of the 3 Cs. So, let's see. Steve is spot on. I have a fabulous girls team, had them since they were little. A great deal of their success has been the incredible relationship they have. It's hard to beat that chemistry and bond on the field. We meet great opponents, but they lack a cohesiveness and an energy. Oh, very interesting. Well, if you have a team where the chemistry is great, they're bonding, you've had them since they were little. Oh my gosh, that's like the best situation when a team has been together for so long and the coach takes them all the way through elementary school, middle school, and hopefully high school. That is such an amazing situation. Oh my gosh. I know a lot of teams like that in the Tampa area, and a few of them are starting to fall apart, which like really breaks my heart. But yeah, it's so sad. And again, like, you don't have to be on, like, the best of the best for college recruiting. You're not going to fall behind, and it just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart, and just kinda coming back to my Hall of Fame induction and just reflecting on the journey. So, this is actually the funny part to all of this. So, when I switched to Bethesda Soccer Club, I went to all the showcases. I was getting seen by top 25 D1 schools, and it was great. And I was getting recruited by University of Wisconsin, University of Maryland, George Washington University. Even Coach Weil, the head coach at Hopkins, he was like, "Look, like, Erica was a top 25 D1 player. We're not sure why she came here." But Coach Weil at Hopkins, he did not necessarily recruit me at a showcase. He saw me play at one showcase, but that didn't seal the deal for him. He was like, "Yeah, we kinda need to see you play again." He saw me play at a high school game at our state championship final, and I've talked about this before in the podcast, but that was the game that sealed the deal. So, could I have stayed on my other club team with my best friends and still gotten recruited by Leo by inviting him to all my high school games? I wish I knew that too. So if you want to play at a local college in your state, they will come out to high school games, especially if your high school team is really good. So think about that. And Don Williams with SRUSA Recruiting, he's talked about this all the time before. Like, the local college teams, it is much easier to get seen because they're right in your backyard. So I wish I looked into that a little bit more. But, you know, while I did leave my best friends, Bethesda Soccer Club, I I really think I developed so well as a player, and I also think it did prepare me a lot for college. So, I don't know, like, I know I'm, like, just, like, pondering everything, but there is so much to ponder on all this, and you just have to decide what's most important to you in this moment right now, and I don't think you can make a wrong decision because I think with any decision you make, you might look back and have some regrets or be like, "Oh, well, what if, what if we stayed on this team or what if we did this? What if we did that?" But you'll always have those, but I don't think you can make a wrong decision. I think everyone goes through their own soccer journey, and there are going to be things that are great. There are going to be things that aren't so great. But overall, was it a good experience? Did you have great memories? Did you make good friends at any point along that journey? Did you learn teamwork? Did you learn how to compete? Did you learn leadership? Did you laugh a lot? Did you smile? Were you spending most of the time in joy and not crying and being upset? I mean, these are important questions to ask, but I don't think you can make like a devastatingly wrong decision because every decision won't be perfect. I hope that helps. I'm, like, grateful everyone DM me and was asking for my advice, and people maybe respect the advice I might give, but obviously I grew up during a very different time, but again, when I went to the Hall of Fame thing at Hopkins, the things that stuck out the most for me were team memories and friendships and relationships and my amazing coaches along the way. It was not perfect at all. Of course, there are things maybe I wonder what would have happened if I had done certain things, but overall, it was an amazing journey and that's what youth soccer is all about. There's going to be so many ups and downs. There's going to be so many moments that are like, "Oh crap, like what do we do?" or "I can't believe this happened." But it just makes the whole experience really rich. And that's really what I'm going to end with today. I hope this helps you guys. I will take questions and comments in the caption below, but only you can make the decision based on your situation and what you want out of this experience. And I hope my advice just gets you thinking. So I'll see you guys on the next episode.